Oh, hello. Happy Friday. Selamat petang. I am Sarah of Expat in Croatia, and this is 5-Question Friday. Every Friday at 5 o'clock Croatia time, we answer 5 questions about Croatia from people who have sent them in on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, expatinCroatia.com, email, our consulting sessions, and people who communicate them through a game of Pictionary. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. I am back in Split and I am indoors because apparently it's fall again. So today we have some pura coming in from the north and it is cold and windy. So I could not be outside today, sadly, even though the sun is out and it looks like it would be nice outside and it should be nice outside, but it is not. It is not nice outside. I have a little quick, this is such a Croatian thing to happen story to tell you that happened last weekend. So I was in the States for 5 weeks, and when I came home, my car wouldn't start. And then it proceeded to not start for several days after that. So on Saturday, I went to the dealership that specializes in the brand of car that I have. Because my mechanic's not usually open on Saturday. So I was like, I'm just going to go there, try and get this sorted out because they're open from 8 to 1. So I went there and there wasn't anyone in the office. There was only some gentlemen working on a Mercedes in the inner part of the dealership, whatever. And I was like, interesting, because this place is not for Mercedes. It's for a Japanese car maker. And so I felt like this was his personal car that he was working on, which is fine. And, I asked him, when's your colleague get back? And he's like, oh, he's at FINA getting cash. He'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, great. So his colleague came back and I told him, look, I don't know what the situation is. It could be the alternator. It could be the battery. And he said, well, if it's the alternator, you're going to have to come back on Monday because my colleague... And he just sighed and didn't say anything else. So I think the end of that sentence was, well, my colleague, the mechanic, is working on his personal car today, so we're not accepting any customers today, is what I think the end of that sentence was. But I was like, okay, thankfully it was the battery. One, that's cheaper, but two, the guy who mans the front office was able to handle it for me in 15 minutes. But I just thought it just so funny that a business would not serve customers one day because somebody on staff needs to work on their own car. It doesn't bother me at all. I just found it really charming and such a classic story that happens here in this country. So what else do I have to tell you today? So if you watched last week's episode, I told you about how I did this presentation for the Brotherhood of Croatian Dragons to become a dragon. And I found out on Monday that they did a vote after that presentation, and I'm officially a dragon apprentice. So for the next 6 months, I have to be active in the organization and do projects and possibly a lecture, which if I do a lecture, it'll be open to the public. They do every Wednesday. They have lectures at the Dragon's Lair in Zagreb, and those are open to the public. Anybody can attend those. So if I do end up doing a lecture, scheduling a lecture in the next 6 months, I'll be sure to let you guys know, and hopefully you will come and see that. If you don't know what I'm talking about at all, I tell you all about it on last week's episode. So check that out. Last thing I want to tell you before you get into the questions, super quick, is so the Croatian Women of Influence Awards, which is put on by the Croatian Women's Network. So I won this award in 2023. For 2024, I was a judge, and now they've asked me to be part of the planning committee for next year's awards, the ones in March. And what's super cool about this set of awards is it's the 10th anniversary of the awards. And so it's supposed to be the biggest thing that they've ever done. And I can't tell you any details about it, but what I can tell you is the goal is for it to be elevated, glamorous, and spectacular. So I just had my first planning meeting just before 5-Question Friday, and I'm really excited to be a part of that with a bunch of other previous winners from previous years. and that'll be super fun. So as I'm able to share stuff, I will share stuff about that. But so far it's going to be pretty neat, but it's still top secret. So that's all of that. Hey, Cam's here, guys. All right, so let's go ahead and dig into the questions. All of our questions today were submitted through the 5-Question Friday form. So let's go ahead and get into it. This first one is from Ellie. I was injured serving in the U.S. military and now receive non-taxable VA disability compensation. Now that I have Croatian citizenship, will I be taxed on this income if I move to Croatia? So first, citizenship is unrelated to income tax in Croatia. You are subject to income tax if you're a resident. It's not related to your citizenship, but it's a natural question to come from a U.S. citizen because income taxation is related to your citizenship in America, not towards residence. So, well, residence too, but citizenship predominantly. So, how is this treated in Croatia? So, according to the tax office, disability compensation is not taxable. However, every person's tax situation is different and there are a variety of factors to be considered, including treaties or lack thereof. For example, the U.S. does not have a double taxation treaty in place with Croatia that is active, okay? So we did find that the tax office actually has on their website a little explanation about how they deal with this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you. So for income received from abroad, regardless of whether it's income from employment, such as disability pension, or income that is not considered taxable, like a disability allowance or compensation, the taxpayer is required to submit a registration to the competent tax office, so the one that's closest to their residence or habitual place of stay. This includes submitting the RPO form. This is the registration form for the taxpayer register and reliable documentation to show the income or receipt. So then they're going to review that documentation and then they're going to essentially make a decision on whether or not you have to pay taxes on that income. So while we're talking about disability income, this is really the same process that you would go through for any kind of foreign income. You are supposed to register it with the tax office, and then they will tell you whether or not you have to pay tax on it. However, we don't recommend that you do that as a first step. We always recommend you speak to a tax advisor first, because once the tax office knows everything, then you are liable for income tax. We do not recommend anyone evade taxes, but it's best that you talk to a tax advisor first to find out what your liability is before you take that step. So that way you can kind of just make sure that everything is in order before you go to the tax office. That's just a very good natural first step. So if you would like to speak to a tax advisor, we can absolutely recommend one. You can go to expatandcroatia.com, send us a DM. I'm also dropped a link down into the description for our YouTube folks, or you can drop a comment and we will get that to you, okay? What else? Also we have a couple of links on the tax administration's website about how they handle disability income. So if you'd like those, we've also got those too, okay? All right, so our next question comes from Michael. I am interested in applying for Croatian citizenship through descent. When I was 18, I had a legal issue involving a property-related offense. I have not yet pursued a record suspension, formerly known as a pardon, in Canada, but I'm willing to do so if it will positively impact my eligibility. Would this past offense make me ineligible for Croatian citizenship by descent? Okay, so I can't say definitively, and this is why. Because when you're applying for citizenship or residence and you have to submit like a background check, they are looking for felonies. So felonies are like totally like no-goes, okay? So in many countries, you have this classification between a misdemeanor and a felony. And in Canada, they don't use that system. So instead, they use what's called either a summary offense, which is close to a misdemeanor, or an indictable offense that is similar to a felony. Now, Cam, this is what I found out based on my research. So as our token Canadian on the team, please correct me if I'm wrong. So this person, Michael, did not clarify whether or not this was a summary offense or whether this was an indictable offense. So I can't speak to whether or not it would be considered a felony or not. So that's something to consider. Now, Something that some people do when they do have an offense that is on their criminal background check that is not subject to the same misdemeanor felony kind of classification is they have a lawyer from their country make a statement, on letterhead that says, this is considered to be, a misdemeanor level infraction. Okay. In this case, there are kind of two recommendations I would make. One is if he can get it scrubbed for his record, get it scrubbed from your record. That way you don't have any risk at all. That's the best. If that's not something that is easily done, then I would definitely speak to a lawyer about it first, and then they can make a recommendation in terms of what that letter should say. So that way you can support that, because it is a risk to submit it without having a very clear classification of misdemeanor or felony, because they're not going to necessarily know what it is. And they may request more information in the middle of the process, and that just delays everything. So it's better just to kind of get ahead of it and try and provide the supporting documentation you need to either explain it or remove it from your background check entirely. Okay. So we have a couple of things we can send you. One, how to get an introduction to a vetted lawyer who can advise on that kind of situation, and then how to get a background check and an apostille in Canada. So if you need those, find us, expatinCroatia.com, description, comment, all of the things. I did see Queenie pop in. Hello. So nice to see you. Okay, so the next question comes from Diana. We purchased a house in Zadar County. We live 6 months in Croatia and 6 months in Canada. I have domovnica, OIB, and osobna iskaznica, to which authorities at MUP office added our Canadian address as our permanent address. Can I change the address on my ID to a Croatian address? What is the criteria for stalno prebivalište in Croatia? So, to put a Croatian address on your national ID card as a citizen, that's who we're talking about as Croatian citizens, you need to provide proof that Croatia is your full-time address, that the address that you're giving them is where you live full-time. Now, based on what Diana shared, she spent 6 months in Croatia, 6 months in Canada, so technically her Croatian address would not be her full-time address. Now, ultimately, it's going to depend on the person that you speak to at MUP, but generally speaking, in our experience the last few years, MUP has been very strict when it comes to Croatian diaspora who have a national ID card with a foreign address on it, because they want to make sure you're actually living here. There has been quite a bit of abuse by Croatian citizens who are living abroad, but they get a Croatian address on their ID card so that they can get access to Croatian benefits, predominantly like the healthcare system. So while the healthcare may not be free, it's still subsidized. It's still something that, people trust. They understand the system. And so they want to get access to that healthcare, and only residents can get access to Croatian healthcare. And by residents, I mean having an ID card that has a Croatian address on it. So 2 years ago, I think it was, HZZO scrubbed like 200,000 people. Like they kicked like 200,000 people off of their rolls because they found out that they were not living in Croatia. And I think it was maybe last year, or maybe it was around the same time, they implemented a new rule where you have to come and check in like every 3 months when you're on the unemployed rate with health insurance, because they want to verify that you're actually living here. So that's kind of the reason behind why they're so strict at MUP about putting a Croatian address. So it's easier to get a Croatian address on a national ID card when you're requesting the national ID card for the very first time. It's a little bit harder when you have a national ID card with a foreign address on it and you're trying to change it to a Croatian address. So they're going to want to see some kind of sign, some kind of proof that this is where you're living full time. So I just want to reiterate, you may talk to somebody at the MUP station closest to where you're living, the administrative station, who will just say, will accept like an excerpt from the land registry and put your Zadar County address on it without giving you any kind of hassle about it. But since you're asking this question, I want to make sure that you're prepared in case they say, well, we're going to need something more from you to see that you're actually living in Croatia full time. And that's the reason why. All right. So we do have a guide on how to register your address with the Croatian police. So if you need that, contact us or go to expatcroatia.com. All right. So our next question comes from Donna. When applying for a digital nomad permit, am I allowed to stay after my 90-day Schengen visa as a U.S. citizen while the application is pending or in process? I have a lawyer, but I think my questions on this are getting lost in translation and there are no clear rules anywhere. I've read from others that the Schengen visa clock stops, but I can't confirm this. Okay, my lawyer says that I cannot stay after my 90 days, so I'm confused, and if I have to leave while the application is processed. Well, your lawyer told you something that's incorrect. So I want to make sure that I clarify this. And just to make sure that everyone understands, this is not just for people who are on the digital nomad permit. This is for anyone who's applied for residence, okay? So the same answer is going to be for all of you, okay? So a U.S. citizen can travel visa-free to Croatia as well as the Schengen zone. So therefore, there is no Schengen visa for those people. For people who can travel visa-free, you don't have a visa. That's the entire idea, okay? So once you submit your application for residence in Croatia, you can stay in Croatia as long as you want. Now, as traveling to Croatia or Schengen visa-free means that you can stay for 90 days in a 180-day period. And every day that you are on the territory of Croatia without a residence permit, you are accruing Schengen time, okay? Up until you hit the 90 days. When you hit 90 days, doesn't matter whether you've applied for residence or not, once you hit that 90 days, you have maxed out your Schengen time. It doesn't mean that it resets. It does not reset. It just tops out. So you're not going to go accrue like 95, 100, 120 days. That's not how it works. It just maxes you out at 90 days, which means you cannot re-enter the Schengen zone until you have a residence permit in Croatia. It's when you get a residence permit in Croatia that your Schengen time resets, but not until then. So generally speaking, it's recommended that you stay in Croatia while your application is in process. That's for a variety of reasons, and one of them is this situation. So yeah, you can stay in Croatia the entire time. That's not an issue. You can stay after the 90 days. You just have to understand that you can't re-enter the Schengen zone until you get an approved permit. All right? So we do have a guide on Croatia's role in Schengen. It also includes some frequently asked questions because, you know, it can seem complicated with Schengen, but it's really important that if you don't understand Schengen time, that you inform yourself, because if you overstay, you risk fines in like the hundreds of euros to thousands of euros, and you risk a ban. And I have seen some people miscalculate and get a 1 or 2 year ban from the Schengen zone, not just Croatia, but like the whole Schengen zone. So that's no fun. All right. So if you'd like that, it's down in the description for YouTube people. DM us on Instagram. Everyone else, just drop a comment or go to expatcroatia.com. Okay, so we've got a question. I applied for a new work permit here. I got a positive decision. 4-month waiting. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That really stinks. So yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot of delays with the processing of work permits. Well, all permits, to be quite honest. And that is, they have a lot of delays because there's such a high demand. And that's why. So I've heard a few people who have had that same experience. It's really unfortunate that that's the case. I would say, try and follow up at Pitanja, Pitanja at mup.hr. Although, in your case, most likely it's your employer who has obtained the work permit for you. So I would also talk to them to see if they have been doing follow-ups with MUP as well. But in that kind of case where it's like you can't work until you get this permit, it's best to kind of stay on top of them within reason. But I would say engage with your lawyer, your employer to try and get that to move along. But it sucks that you're in that situation. Thank you for the question. Okay, our next question, and this is the last one for today, is from Angus. Awesome name. I have just bought a used boat from France with VAT paid and had it towed to Betina near Šibenik to be dry docked. The boat is in my wife's name, who is a Croatian national. How do I now register it in Croatia? It's an open day boat of 6 meters. Congratulations on your new boat. So, I'm just going to quickly go through the boat registration process. So there are a number of documents that you will need to prepare. So one is the application form, which can be downloaded from our guide on how to register a boat. Proof of ownership, construction certificate, sales contract, your personal ID, proof of the conditions for entry, proof determining age and technical acceptability of the boat, and confirmation that it has been deleted from the French Register of Boats. So it can't be registered in 2 European countries at the same time. Well, it can't be registered anywhere in 2 times. It needs to be registered in one place. Okay, so that makes sense. So you can submit these documents through e-Građani, which e-Građani is an online government services portal that everybody with an OIB should be able to access. We have a guide on that if you would like it. So that's going to be the easiest way, is to do it via online through e-Građani. You can also do it through snail mail if you prefer that way. Or you can just go to the harbor master that's closest to you. I would say that's probably going to be the easiest, which would be Šibenik in this case. So once registered, you will get the boat's national identification number, which is your, plate essentially, which must be visible. So that's essentially how you go about it. Not that big of a deal. We do have a guide on how to register a boat. It also includes information on how to import a boat, both from EU as well as non-EU countries. So if you'd like that, you know where to find us. All right. So that's it, guys. Thanks so much for being here. We just whipped through those questions real quick, didn't we? I'll be here next week. I don't know where I'll be. So I'll see. Oh, we got a quick question. Can an American who owns property in Croatia register and own a car in Croatia? No. When I say no, I'm saying that just owning a property doesn't mean you can own a car. So the only way to own a car, and by owning a car, I mean registering a car in Croatia, is you have to have an ID card with a Croatian address on it. So that is what you need to be able to register a car here. And I know that that's a bit of a bummer for a lot of Croatian diaspora out there who come to Croatia for 6 months a year and can't get a Croatian address on their ID card, and then they can't register a car. So that was our first question today, talking about address registration. So yeah, that can be a bit of a challenge, but you need to have an ID with a Croatian address on it to be able to own a car, rent a car, or not rent a car, register a car. How do you get an ID card? Well, if you are a Croatian citizen, then you need to go to an administrative police station and you apply for an osobna iskaznica, a national ID card. If you're not a Croatian citizen, then you need to apply for residence, either through registration, which is for EU citizens, or if you're a non-EU citizen, then you need to apply for residence. You're not a Croatian citizen. Okay, then you need to apply for residence. So if you want information on how to get that started, just send us a DM and we can help guide you through that. What's the process for permanent residence for a third country national? So in this case, it's long-term residence actually. So you need to have 5 years of continuous temporary residence on qualifying purposes to be able to qualify. So once you hit that 5-year and 1 day mark of continuous temporary residence, then you can apply for long-term residence. You will need to pass a language test for B1, and you're going to need to have a salary with a Croatian company. Everything else that is required for it, I'm not going to list here right now because it's all the same stuff that you would have to provide for temporary residence. So you'd already have that. It's just those three unique requirements. So 5 years continuous residence, salary with a Croatian company, and you have to pass a B1 level test from a qualified institution. So we do have a guide on our website for that. So just go to expatcroatia.com and type in permanent residence or long-term residence, and you will find all the requirements and the process there. Okay? Thanks everybody for the extra questions. Do you need temporary or permanent residence to register a car? Yes. Yes. Yes, you do. You need a national ID card with a Croatian address on it. All right, I'm cutting you off. Oh, hey, Logan. What's shaking? All right, thanks so much, everybody, for being here. And if you'd like to see one of your questions answered on a future episode, then contact us, drop a comment, send a carrier pigeon, and we will potentially answer it on a future episode. Thank you so much for being here again. Love you very much. And see you next week. Bye, guys. Ciao.